Claude Opus 5 fits your entire code base in one shot with a 1 million token context window, while Cursor's tab completions fire back in 150 milliseconds. Those two numbers pretty much define this whole comparison. Claude Opus 5 dropped in July 2026, and Cursor keeps getting faster, so this is as fresh as it gets. I'm going through 5 real coding dimensions, sourced from 13 verified references, no vendor spin, to see which one actually saves you time. Honestly, the final score is way closer than I expected, and the one dimension where a clear winner does emerge might completely flip which tool you pick depending on how much of your day is deep refactoring versus quick daily coding. So this is for you if you're a developer trying to figure out where to put your money and your attention. Claude Opus 5 at paper token versus Cursor at $20 a month is a real call. Pick the wrong one and you're either overpaying for speed you don't need or leaving serious capability on the table. All right, test 1 is code completion accuracy. What goes wrong without good completion is pretty specific. You're mid-flow, you type a function signature, and the autocomplete either finishes it correctly in under a second or it guesses wrong and you spend the next 2 minutes cleaning up bad variable names and broken API calls. Okay, so what surprised me is that I only have real numbers for one side. Cursor's tab completion clocks in at 150 to 250 milliseconds on an M2 MacBook Pro, predicting 5 to 15 lines correctly, including variable names and API routes. Claude Opus 5, no published inline completion figure at all, so I can't call a winner. I was expecting Claude Opus 5 to at least have some published latency number, and what actually happened is there's just nothing to compare against. So this one's a tie by default. The data simply isn't there. Score stays at 0 to 0, 1 tied. Test 2, pricing and cost efficiency. The concrete thing that bites people is the surprise bill. You run a heavy agent session with Claude Opus 5 at $25 per million output tokens, and the invoice hits way harder than you planned, or you're on Cursor's Pro plan, you burn through your included agent usage, and suddenly the overage costs are not clear at all. So I looked at both pricing structures side by side, and they're genuinely different models. Claude Opus 5 is paper token, $5 per million input in standard mode, $25 per million output, and a batch API that drops to $2.50 input and $12.50 output. Cursor is a flat subscription, $20 a month on Pro, $60 on Pro Plus, $200 on Ultra with about $400 worth of agent usage included. And yeah, you can't really compare these directly. Light users will find Cursor's $20 flat is probably cheaper. If you're running tons of batch jobs with Claude Opus 5, the batch API at $2.50 per million input tokens could actually be way more cost efficient. It genuinely depends on your usage pattern, and without real usage data, it's hard to say more than that. Honestly, I thought one would clearly win on price, but the models are so different they can't sit on the same scale. Cursor wins on predictability, Claude wins on cache-in and batch discounts, so this one's another tie. That's 0 to 0 now, 2 tests tied. Test 3, multi-file codebase understanding. What actually goes wrong is stubs. You ask an AI to refactor a feature that touches 8 files and it comes back with half the work done and a comment that says, Toto, implement this. Now you're the one finishing the job, which kind of defeats the whole point. What surprised me is how clear the gap is. Claude Opus 5 completes full end-to-end feature work without leaving stubs, uses its 1 million token context window to hold the whole repo in mind, and has built-in self-verification loops that catch errors before you do. Cursor's Composer handles medium complexity well, and its plan mode with clarifying questions is genuinely useful, but complex tasks hit limits Claude doesn't. Now, take this with a grain of salt. For medium complexity changes, both tools are honestly pretty solid, and Cursor's codebase indexing is fast and generates architectural overviews automatically, which is really useful when you're onboarding to a new repo. The gap between them only really opens up when the task is large and spans a lot of files. I was expecting this to be closer, and what actually happened is Claude Opus 5 pulls ahead pretty clearly on the hardest tasks because of self-verification and that massive context window. Claude Opus 5 takes test 3, that puts the score at 1 to 0 for Claude Opus 5, with 2 tests still tied. Test 4, integration and workflow. The thing that kills you here is friction. You pick a tool and then find out your favorite extension doesn't work, your key bindings are gone, or you have to leave your editor entirely just to run an AI query. And that friction compounds every single day you're coding. So I looked at where each tool actually lives. Claude Opus 5 is available in 6+ tools: Claude Code, GitHub Copilot, VS Code, Cursor itself, Hermes Agent, Box AI Studio, and Cloud Platforms, which is real breadth. Cursor is a full VS Code fork, so every extension, every theme, every key binding just works out of the box. Anyways, this is really a flexibility versus depth question. Claude Opus 5 lets you pick your environment and you're not locked in anywhere, while Cursor gives you a super deep native IDE experience, but it's one environment. If you're already living in VS Code, Cursor's transition is basically zero friction, But if you work across multiple platforms, Claude's breadth wins. Honestly, I went in thinking Claude's wider reach would take this one, but Cursor's native VS Code depth is genuinely hard to beat for daily use, and they're strong in totally different ways, so this lands as a tie. Score is now Claude Opus 5-1, Cursor 0, 3 tied, Test 5, response latency. What kills flow here is dead air. You type, you wait, you lose your train of thought, and even a half-second delay on tap completion adds up to real lost time across the full coding session. What I found is that Cursor has a concrete number, 150 to 250 milliseconds for tap completion on an M2 MacBook Pro. And Claude Opus 5 has no published IDE-specific latency figure. Claude Opus 5 does have a fast mode that runs roughly 2.5 times faster than standard, but without a millisecond number for inline completion, I can't put them on the same chart. I was expecting to call Cursor the clear winner here, given that 150 milliseconds number, but without Claude Opus 5's data, it's not a fair fight either way, so this one's also a tie. Final score, Claude Opus 5-1, Cursor 0, 4 tests tied. So here's where Claude Opus 5 is clearly better. It completes full multi-file refactors without leaving stubs, runs a 1 million token context window so the whole code base fits, has built-in self-verification that catches mistakes before you do, and works across 6+ tools so you're not locked into one environment. And here's where Cursor clearly wins. Tap completions at 150 to 250 milliseconds with multi-line context awareness. That's just fast. It's a full VS Code 4, so every extension and key binding works on day one. Pricing is predictable at $20 a month, and the codebase indexing with plan mode gives you structured refactoring before you run a single line. I went in thinking one of these would run away with it. And what I got was 1 win for Claude Opus 5 and 4 ties. So here's the decision rule. If your work is deep architectural refactors across many files, pick Claude Opus 5, 1 million tokens, no stubs. If you want a fast, familiar IDE for daily coding, pick Cursor, $20 a month, done.